with, given the overarching platform for many Iowa Democrats, what would a Democratic vote mean for the Iowa legislature this year?
Well, Nicole, I think that the Iowa Democratic Party is very focused on a few key things. We want to make sure that we are protecting and fully funding our public schools and rejecting Governor Reynolds' radical school voucher program that will defund Iowa's public schools. It will also mean a vote to protect the Roe versus Wade decision and access to abortion rights here in Iowa. We know that Governor Reynolds and other Iowa Republicans have called for full abortion bans without exceptions in our state, and we strongly oppose those. Finally, it's going to mean that we need to restore balance to our state government. When we have total party control in Iowa, the Republican majority has gone so extreme. We need to get back to middle of the road bipartisan lawmaking, and that's not happening right now. And that's why we're asking for Iowans to vote for Democrats in November.
As you know, Democrats across Iowa have lost ground in the legislature, just looking at the numbers and the balance of power there in the House, Senate, and of course with the governor's office as well. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that President Trump spoke to a lot of Iowans who felt very disaffected by the political system. And there's no doubt that there were a lot of coattails that he had here in Iowa. I think when we look at what we're starting to see across the country, President Biden's leadership on things like the bipartisan infrastructure deal, making sure that we're actually supporting American manufacturing and bringing those jobs back from overseas. That's the kind of thing that should be bringing Americans together. And so our hope is that as those successes continue to stack up, we're going to be able to continue to re-engage voters with Democrats here in Iowa. But again, this comes back to trying to protect our freedoms, protect our public education, and bringing back some common sense bipartisan lawmaking in Iowa.
So you feel that President Trump had a very strong impact here in Iowa in rallying support around the Republican Party?
I do.
Do you anticipate gaining ground or gaining seats this year?
I sure hope so. We have some incumbents who are running for re-election, folks like Senator Kevin Kinney, who's a farmer and also spent more than 20 years as a sheriff's deputy, who's running against Republican Senator Don Driscoll. They were paired together with redistricting. Kevin is a very moderate, common sense Democrat. He has a strong farm and law enforcement background. Unfortunately, Republicans have been lying about Kevin's record and accusing him of betraying law enforcement, which is ludicrous when you think about the 26 years that he spent as a member of law enforcement. It's also why Kevin's gotten endorsements from Republicans on the other side of the aisle, folks like Republican Representative Dave Maxwell and Jared Klein. We also know that in the Des Moines metro area, there are going to be several competitive races, both Senator Sarah Chung Garriott, who's running against Republican Senator Jake Chapman, a similar situation there. They were put together with redistricting, as well as Todd Brady, a software engineer who helped hundreds of thousands of Iowans, including my wife, find a vaccine when he built the website Vaccine Hunter, and has a kind of roll up your sleeves and get it done mentality in that competitive seat over in Ankeny. So we know that there are going to be competitive opportunities both for our incumbents and for challengers all over Iowa. And it's going to be a little bit of an unusual cycle coming out of the redistricting process last year, where you're going to have a lot of incumbents paired together running against each other in the same district.
How did redistricting impact races for Democrats this year?
Well, it expanded the playing field in a lot of ways. In a normal year, you only have 25 out of the 50 seats that are up in any individual campaign cycle, and now it's up to 35. So there's just more of these races all over the state. Democrats are contesting more of these races than Republicans are, and so we're excited about our opportunities this fall.
If you don't make up the ground that you hope you will, or these opportunities don't work out in favor of the Democratic Party, how do you go into another legislative session that was very combative in the last couple of years, just given the numbers? And how do you balance some of the Republican social agenda?
Well, most of the kind of combative things that you were describing were actually with Republicans fighting with each other over how extreme they wanted to be. Republicans do control majorities in both chambers and the governorship. And the fight was basically how much money do you want to take out of the public school system and hand over to the private school system? Now, thankfully, that didn't pass last year. But the governor, as your viewers probably know, has promised that she's going to continue to push for this, trying to use taxpayer money for private schools. We oppose that 100%. And we know that what we really need to do is be supporting our public education system, because that's what makes Iowa, Iowa. That's who we are as a state. And unfortunately, today's Republican Party seems to have forgotten that.
Is it possible to find meaningful legislation that will offer some middle ground that would be a win-win for both Republicans and Democrats?
Of course, and we're going to continue to look for those opportunities. I mentioned Senator Kevin Kinney, who's running for re-election in Eastern Iowa. Kevin was one of the authors of Iowa's bipartisan hemp law that legalized industrial hemp, which is a great new crop for lawmakers who had this vision that we could be able to get our farmers this new opportunity. And so that's something that we were really excited about. Kevin played an instrumental role in that. He actually just had an op-ed about that experience in the Gazette recently. And I know that that's the kind of mentality that we're going to continue to bring, whether we're in the majority or the minority.
One of the criticisms, as you know, of the Democratic Party in Iowa and really across the country is spending. And especially when you talk about, protecting funding for schools and making sure money's funneling into the right place. How do you address concerns of being fiscally responsible?
Well, I mean, it's Governor Reynolds who's spending all this federal money. She's the one who said that she opposed the American Rescue Plan, but is now happily spending all of these dollars. And so I think that if you want to talk about spending, that's a question that Governor Reynolds really needs to answer because she's the one who's spending all the money.
How do you look at some of
I would take that one step further. We know that we are seeing prices go up at the same time that we're seeing record corporate profits. But it was Republicans who passed a law that gave corporations a huge tax cut. They're the ones who are rewarding these increasing prices at the same time that corporations are reporting record profits, not just in Iowa, but across the country.
there is narrowing in on closing on a situation where there wouldn't have to be any Democratic opposition for Governor Reynolds to put forth a nominee and for that nominee to just go through. Should that be a concern for Iowans?
Oh, absolutely. Look, we want to make sure that if it's at all possible that we have Democrats and Republicans working together. We have a system of checks and balances for a reason. That's the whole point that our founders put into the national constitution and that our founders put into the Iowa Constitution. So again, so much of what we're trying to do is just maintain that balance so that we have good bipartisan lawmaking happening, and that includes appointments and nominees.
Anything else, Senator, that I didn't ask that you feel that would be important for our viewers to know?
I think that's pretty good.